You have said thank you. You have written the lists, repeated the phrases, sat quietly and tried to feel it. Morning after morning, you have practiced what every teacher said to practice. And yet the circumstances have not moved. The relationships remain strained, the money remains tight. The life you are reaching towards stays exactly where it was, just beyond the edge of what gratitude has brought you. You are doing the ritual. You are not getting the result. And somewhere underneath the practice, a quiet and honest voice keeps asking whether any of this is actually real. The reason it has not worked is not that you are ungrateful by nature. The reason is that you have been practicing a diminished version of something vast. Most people treat gratitude the way they treat good manners, a pleasant gesture, a spiritual courtesy, a way of acknowledging what they already have without demanding more. It becomes a mood to cultivate on good days and abandon on hard ones. It becomes a kind of emotional politeness, signaling that you are not greedy, that you appreciate what life has given. And because you have accepted that weak definition, the real force behind gratitude has remained invisible. You have been holding a key and using it as decoration. At the turn of the 20th century, a man named Wallace Wattles wrote a short but quietly devastating book called The Science of Getting Rich. Inside it, he placed gratitude not as a chapter on thankfulness, but as one of the central pillars of creation itself. Wattles understood that gratitude is the force that keeps the mind turned toward source, toward what he called the formless thinking stuff from which all supply flows. Without gratitude, he argued, desire collapses back into the awareness of absence. The mind stops reaching toward supply and begins instead to study the lack. And when the mind is fixed on lack, it cannot produce the conditions that allow wealth, creation, and new life to enter. This video will give you what most gratitude teachings never reach. It will show you that gratitude is not a list and not a feeling. It is a current, a living directional force that keeps you in receiving relation with the source of all supply. Wattles called it the beginning of the certain way, and he meant it with full seriousness. You may have practiced gratitude as a practice, but you have never yet practiced it as a force. That distinction is the hidden key. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly what it opens. Consider what most gratitude looks like in practice. A person wakes up, reaches for a notebook and writes 5 things they are grateful for. The words appear on the page: health, family, shelter, food, another day. The pen moves. The task is completed. Then the notebook closes, the coffee is made, and the mind returns to exactly what it was thinking before. The unpaid bill, the strained conversation, the opportunity that has not arrived. The list was written, nothing transferred. The gratitude never moved from the page to the interior of the person who wrote it. This is the mechanical form. It is gratitude as checklist, not gratitude as relation. The person has learned that grateful people are supposed to acknowledge their blessings, so they acknowledge them. But acknowledgement without inner contact is like signing a document you have not read. The words are there. The presence is not. And because there is no presence, there is no current. And because there is no current, nothing changes in the direction that gratitude is supposed to move things. There is also the problem of conditionality, being grateful only when the evidence is favorable. On the day a check arrives, gratitude flows easily. On the day nothing moves, gratitude is forced or absent entirely. This makes gratitude a reaction to the world rather than a position toward the world. The person is training themselves to feel gratitude only when circumstances have already done the work, which means gratitude never gets the chance to do its own. Finally, there is gratitude as obligation. I should be grateful. There are people worse off than me. This kind of gratitude is not a force. It is a suppression. It silences the honest awareness of what is missing without replacing it with anything real. The person performs gratitude to avoid the guilt of wanting more, and the performance drains the very energy that real gratitude is meant to generate. This is how a powerful law gets reduced to an exhausting and ineffective duty. Beyond the mechanical list, there is a more sophisticated failure. Gratitude used as a kind of spiritual performance. A person discovers that grateful people seem more at peace, more magnetic, more aligned with good outcomes. And so they cultivate gratitude as a persona. They speak gratefully. They frame their words carefully. They present a version of themselves that always seems to be seeing the bright side. But underneath the surface, the fear remains untouched. The gratitude is covering it, not dissolving it. This is gratitude used to suppress fear rather than to release it. The person is afraid that the money will not come, afraid that things will fall apart, afraid that the desire is foolish, and so they reach for gratitude as an antidote to anxiety. But gratitude cannot function as a sedative and a current at the same time. When it is used to silence fear, it becomes a coping mechanism. When it becomes a coping mechanism, it loses all connection to the deeper law it was meant to serve. Then there is the version that appears in certain spiritual and social circles, gratitude as the proof of one's elevation. I am grateful for all of it, the good and the bad. I have transcended preference. This sounds evolved, but it often masks a refusal to desire honestly. Real gratitude in Wattles' framework is not the absence of want. It is the recognition that supply is real and that the mind is in right relation with it. Gratitude that uses transcendence as its justification frequently disconnects from the very source it claims to honor. All of these forms share one invisible defect. None of them involve any actual connection to source. The mind is moving within its own theater, performing, suppressing, signaling, but nothing in the practice reaches outward and upward into the formless intelligence that Wattles described as the origin of all supply. Without that connection, the practice remains a closed loop. You are speaking into a room where no one is listening because you have not yet understood that the key to being heard is the act of turning toward the one who can respond. Here is what weak gratitude costs, and why the cost is rarely visible until the habit has run for years. The first casualty is relation. True gratitude, as Wattles understood it, is fundamentally relational. It is the mind acknowledging its living connection to an active, responsive source. Weak gratitude has no relational dimension. It moves in one direction, toward things already possessed, without ever directing attention toward the origin of those things. The relation to source never forms. And without that relation, the supply that flows from source has no channel through which to reach you. The second casualty is faith. Faith, in Wattles' system, is not a vague spiritual aspiration. It is the stable expectation of supply. It is the mental posture of a person who knows that the formless thinking stuff responds to definite thought held with confidence. Gratitude stabilizes faith because it continuously affirms that supply is real and already moving. Weak gratitude, practiced mechanically or conditionally, cannot stabilize anything. It rises when circumstances are good and evaporates when they are not, which means faith follows the same erratic pattern, present on good days, absent when most needed. The third casualty is what Wattles called lack consciousness. The mind that is not held in active gratitude tends naturally toward awareness of what is missing. This is not a moral failure. It is simply the direction gravity pulls attention when no force is applied in another direction. Without the current of real gratitude, the mind settles back into counting absences, and a mind fixed on absence cannot hold the clear, confident image of supply that Wattles said was essential to the creative process. The image blurs, the desire loses clarity, the channel cannot form. What you are left with after years of mechanical gratitude without current is a ritual that exhausts you without rewarding you. You know you are supposed to be grateful. You feel vaguely guilty that gratitude has not transformed your life. You wonder whether you are missing some technique, some emotional quality, some depth of feeling that others possess and you lack. But the problem was never your feeling. The problem was the direction of the practice. You were thanking your circumstances instead of thanking your source. And circumstances, unlike source, have no power to respond. What Wattles offered was something entirely different from the grateful feeling that positive psychology endorses or the thankfulness that polite culture rewards. He offered a relational model. Gratitude, in his understanding, is the mental act of turning toward the creative intelligence that underlies all visible supply and staying turned. It is not a reaction to what has already arrived. It is a position maintained before what is coming has made itself visible. That distinction is everything. A reaction is passive. A position is active. A reaction depends on the world. A position shapes it. This means gratitude is not something you practice after you receive. It is the condition under which receiving becomes possible. Think of what this implies. If you are waiting for circumstances to improve before you feel genuinely grateful, you have reversed the order of causation entirely. You have made gratitude the child of favorable evidence rather than the parent of it. And in doing so, you have dismantled the very mechanism that gratitude was designed to operate. Wattles was clear on this point because he understood the mind's relationship to the formless source as a matter of attention and alignment. The grateful mind is aligned. It is pointed in the right direction. It expects supply because it has already acknowledged the source of supply, and the acknowledgement keeps the line of connection open. The ungrateful mind, or the mechanically grateful one, is misaligned. It points toward absence, even when it mouths words of thanks because the words are not directed toward anything living. The law, then, is not complicated in its statement, even if it demands great discipline in its practice. Gratitude connects the mind to the source. That connection stabilizes faith. Faith preserves the image of supply. The image held with faith becomes the creative pattern from which the formless thinking stuff molds visible results. Break the gratitude, and you break the chain at its very first link. The next section will show you exactly what that law contains, where it comes from, and why Wattles placed it not at the end of the creative process, but at its beginning. The law is this: the grateful mind is a receiving mind. Not because gratitude is a reward system that the universe operates like a vending machine, but because gratitude, properly directed, keeps the mind in the one posture from which supply can be recognized, approached, and drawn. Wattles stated it without apology. Gratitude is essential to the science of getting rich. He did not mean that politeness pays off. He meant that the alignment created by a genuinely grateful mind changes the entire direction of mental force. And mental force, in his system, is the force that shapes the formless into the visible. Consider what gratitude does to the quality of attention. When the mind holds genuine gratitude toward the source of supply, attention is directed toward abundance. Not the performed pretense of it, but the actual recognition that supply exists, that it is real, that it flows from a creative intelligence that is responsive to thought. That direction of attention is not neutral. Attention shaped by gratitude reaches toward supply. Attention shaped by lack reaches toward more lack. These are not metaphors. They describe the functional difference between two modes of mental operation. And Wattles built his entire system on understanding which mode connects to source and which one severs the connection. Gratitude also prevents the mind from dwelling in lack, and this is not a minor benefit. The mind that dwells in lack is not simply unhappy. It is, in Wattles' terms, operating at the wrong frequency of thought. The formless thinking stuff is moved by definite, confident, grateful thought. It does not respond to thought that is anxious, resentful, doubtful, or rooted in comparison with what is missing. Gratitude is the specific mental act that lifts thought out of lack and places it in proximity to the creative source. Without it, even the most clearly defined desire sinks back into the anxiety of wanting without expectation. Beyond attention and protection from lack, gratitude strengthens faith in a way that willpower alone cannot. Faith requires a foundation, something the mind can rest its certainty on when circumstances have not yet shifted. Gratitude provides that foundation by continuously affirming the reality of source. Every act of genuine gratitude is a declaration that supply is not theoretical, that the formless thinking stuff is real, that the relation is active. Repeated over time, this declaration builds the mental architecture that makes sustained faith possible. The person who practices gratitude as a current does not need proof before they believe. Their gratitude is already the proof of relation, proof of alignment, proof of position. This is why Wattles placed gratitude at the beginning of the creative process rather than at its conclusion. The image of supply must be held with clarity. Faith must remain stable. The channel must remain open. And all of these conditions depend on the continuous practice of turning towards Source with recognition and with thanks. Gratitude is not what you feel after creation completes. Gratitude is what keeps creation moving. It is the living thread that connects desire to delivery, thought to substance, the image held in mind to the form that eventually appears in the world. Wattles was writing at a time when the inner life was beginning to be taken seriously as a causal force, not as sentiment, not as religious obligation, but as a functional creative power. He had studied deeply theology, philosophy, the emerging literature of mental causation, and from all of that study, he extracted a working model that was practical, precise, and completely unsentimental. Gratitude in his model was not about being a good or spiritual person. It was about being an effective one. It was about keeping the creative circuit intact. When he wrote about the relation between the grateful mind and the formless thinking stuff, he was describing a dynamic that operates through something closer to physics than to poetry. The formless substance responds to thought. Thought shaped by gratitude is thought that reaches towards supply and expects to be met. Thought shaped by ingratitude or complaint is thought that circles within its own closed loop, generating more of what it studies, which is absence. Wattles was not being mystical when he said this. He was being mechanistic, and the mechanism he was pointing to is the relationship between the quality of thought and the direction of creative response. The grateful mind, in Wattles' vision, expects supply, not because it is optimistic by temperament, but because gratitude is the specific mental act of acknowledging that supply is already the nature of Source. When the mind thanks the formless for what it is, abundant, creative, responsive, inexhaustible, it is not asking for something new. It is affirming a relation that already exists, and in affirming it, keeping it active and productive. The grateful mind does not perform expectation. It holds it as a settled fact, grounded in the ongoing acknowledgement of the source that cannot be exhausted. Contrast this with what Wattles called the ungrateful mind. He was not describing a bitter or resentful person specifically, though bitterness and resentment are acute forms of it. The ungrateful mind is simply the mind that does not direct its attention toward the source of supply with recognition and thanks. Instead, it studies what is absent, measures what has not yet arrived, and draws its conclusions about supply from the current state of visible circumstances. This mind is always one bad day away from losing faith entirely, because it has built its faith on evidence rather than on the nature of Source. One setback and the structure collapses, because it was never resting on anything more stable than the most recent result. The distinction between the grateful mind and the ungrateful one is not a distinction of character. It is a distinction of direction. Both people may have the same desire, both may put in similar effort, but one of them is pointed toward Source, and the other is pointed toward the absence of what they want. The same intelligence, the same ambition, the same available time, directed in opposite directions, producing opposite results. That is Wattles' insight. And understanding it fully means understanding why he placed gratitude not among the virtues, but among the laws. Before going deeper into the mechanism, it is important to clear away the most common misreading of what Wattles was saying, because the misreading is seductive and widespread. And it creates a version of gratitude that is not only useless but subtly damaging. The misreading is this, that gratitude requires you to deny pain, pretend difficulty does not exist, or maintain a performance of contentment while your actual life remains in distress. This is not what Wattles taught. It is not what he meant, and practicing it will not produce the result he described. Gratitude is not the refusal to see difficulty. The person who is genuinely practicing gratitude as Wattles defined it is not closing their eyes to the broken furnace, the missed opportunity, or the drained account. They are not pretending those things are wonderful. What they are doing is refusing to let those circumstances determine where the mind rests its attention. There is a significant difference between seeing a circumstance clearly and being anchored to it as the final word on what is real and possible. gratitude does not blind. It redirects. Similarly, gratitude is not the act of thanking lack. Some teachings, particularly those that have absorbed Wattles superficially, suggest that the student should be grateful for difficult circumstances, as though the difficulty itself were a gift. This collapses the direction of gratitude. Wattles was not asking you to thank the experience of poverty. He was asking you to thank the source that contains inexhaustible supply, regardless of your current visible state. These are not the same thing. One points gratitude at a condition that reinforces lack. The other points gratitude at the origin of abundance. Only one of those directions connects you to the current. The deeper misinterpretation is the idea that gratitude is passive, that it is a quality of someone who accepts whatever they receive without wanting more. Wattles directly contradicts this. The grateful person is not passive. They are profoundly active in their inner orientation. Gratitude is the mental activity of maintaining alignment with Source, while the outer world has not yet rearranged itself to match the inner image. It is the action of holding the channel open under pressure. Far from passivity, it requires greater inner discipline than ambition alone, because ambition feeds on visible progress, while gratitude must sustain itself before evidence appears. What Wattles was describing then is a mind that lives between two realities simultaneously, the visible world as it currently stands, and the invisible supply that is already available from Source. The grateful mind honors both without confusing one for the other. It does not pretend the visible world is perfect. It does not pretend the invisible supply is absent. It occupies the creative space between them, using gratitude as the force that keeps it oriented correctly, facing Source, receiving, moving forward through the certain way. Here is the word that the title chose deliberately, and it is worth pausing on it. The word is forces. Gratitude forces creation. Not encourages it, not invites it, not supports it, forces it. And that word is precise, because what Wattles was describing is not a gentle nudge toward better outcomes. It is a mechanism that compels the mind into the only position from which creation can operate. Held in connection with Source, stable in faith, clear in image, open in channel. Gratitude does not merely help. It is the condition without which the system does not function at all. How does gratitude force creation? It forces it by holding the mind in receiving relation. The mind that stays genuinely grateful cannot simultaneously be closed to supply. The two states are incompatible. A truly grateful mind has already acknowledged that supply is real and available, which means it is in the structural posture of receiving, open, directed toward the Source, expectant. Creation moves toward that posture the way water moves toward an opening in a vessel. Gratitude forces creation by making the mind an opening rather than a wall. Gratitude also forces the viewer out of contradiction. Consider the mind that desires wealth while simultaneously dwelling on its absence. These two mental states cancel each other. The desire reaches outward, but the lack focus pulls it back inward. The mind is working against itself, consuming its own creative energy in the friction of contradiction. Gratitude resolves the contradiction. It holds the image of supply while acknowledging the source of it. There is no longer a war between the desire and the awareness of absence, because the awareness is no longer fixed on absence. Gratitude has redirected it. Perhaps most practically, gratitude forces action to come from supply rather than from fear. This is one of Wattles' most important observations. The person who acts from lack consciousness, who moves fast because they are afraid of falling behind, who works desperately because they feel the ground is unstable, produces a quality of action that repels the very outcomes they are pursuing. Desperation is visible in behavior. It contracts rather than expands the available channels. Gratitude, by holding the mind in relation to supply, allows action to proceed from sufficiency. The person still works hard, still moves with purpose, but the quality of their action carries a different force. It is the force of a person cooperating with abundance rather than fleeing from its absence. The force of gratitude, then, is not metaphorical. It is the specific mechanical action of holding the mind in the only position that allows the chain of creation to remain intact. Attention on supply, faith stable, Image clear, channel open, action proceeding from cooperation rather than fear. Remove gratitude, and every link in that chain is at risk. Hold it firmly, practice it as law rather than as mood, and the entire system moves. That is what it means to force creation. And that is what Wattles meant when he placed gratitude at the center of the certain way. The gratitude current is not a metaphor invented to make the law more memorable. It is a description of something that actually happens inside the mind when gratitude is practiced in the precise way Wattles intended. Think of it as a current in the electrical sense, a directional flow of energy between 2 points. On one side is the human mind with its desire, its image, its capacity for faith. On the other side is the formless source, the creative intelligence that Wattles called the thinking stuff, the origin from which all visible supply is shaped. Gratitude is what keeps that current moving between the two. Without it, the circuit is incomplete and nothing flows. The first quality of this current is recognition. Genuine gratitude is not performed feeling. It is an act of recognition, the mind acknowledging in a deliberate and sustained way that something real exists beyond the visible evidence of the moment. The source of supply is real. It is not waiting to be earned or begged into motion. It is already active, already tending toward the person who remains in receiving relation with it. Recognition of this is not naive optimism. It is accurate perception of the most fundamental fact in Wattles' entire framework. Supply is the nature of source. Gratitude is the act of recognizing that nature directly. Beyond recognition, the current has the quality of living connection. A mechanical, habitual gratitude list maintains no living connection. It is like leaving a wire unplugged and pretending the lamp is receiving power. Living connection requires presence, an actual interior contact between the mind and what it is thanking. This cannot be manufactured by frequency of repetition alone. It requires the mind to genuinely direct itself toward the source, to hold for a moment the real acknowledgement that the formless is responsive, that supply is not fictional, that the relation between mind and source is not theoretical, but active and generative. The current also produces what might be called the posture of already related supply. This is subtle but critical. The grateful mind is not asking whether supply is available. That question has already been resolved by the act of gratitude itself. The person who thanks source for supply has already, in the act of thanking, placed themselves in relation to supply. They are no longer petitioning. They are connected. They are no longer hoping supply exists. They are acknowledging that it does, and that acknowledgement, when held with consistency, becomes the mental posture from which all receiving proceeds. It is the difference between standing at a door wondering if it leads somewhere, and standing at a door you have already walked through once and know to be real. Faith is the element that gratitude stabilizes above all else. Faith, as Wattles defined it, is not wishful thinking. It is the confident expectation of supply based on the known nature of source. But confident expectation is difficult to maintain in a moving, unpredictable life, where visible evidence often argues against it. Gratitude gives faith something to stand on that does not depend on today's evidence. Every time the mind turns in genuine gratitude towards source, it reinforces the reality of the relation. Faith is not strengthened by proof alone. It is strengthened by repeated, genuine contact with the thing believed in. Gratitude is that contact. The key in the title is not decorative language. The channel that connects the mind to the formless source has a specific structure in Wattles' model. It must be kept open through mental alignment, and the primary means of alignment is gratitude. The key metaphor is accurate. Gratitude is what keeps the channel unlocked. When gratitude is absent or weak or practiced mechanically without contact, the channel closes. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually. The mind drifts back toward lack consciousness. Faith softens, the image blurs, and what was an open and productive channel becomes blocked by accumulated doubt. Gratitude is the key that prevents this from happening. Not once, but continuously. The mechanism begins with attention. Gratitude, genuinely practiced, changes where the mind looks. This is not a small thing. In any given moment, the human mind can direct its attention toward what is present, what is absent, what has worked, what has failed, what might arrive, or what seems to be receding. Gratitude draws attention consistently toward presence and supply. The person who begins their day with a genuine act of gratitude toward Source is not beginning the day neutrally. They are beginning it with attention already pointed in the direction of abundance. Everything that follows is affected by that initial direction. When attention changes, expectation follows. The mind does not expect outcomes randomly. It expects in proportion to where attention has been trained to rest. A person whose attention has been held in gratitude tends toward the expectation of supply, not because they are forcing positive thinking, but because their mental field is oriented toward the reality of Source. Expectation is not a feeling that appears by itself. It is the natural consequence of sustained attention. Train attention toward supply through gratitude, and expectation of supply becomes the mind's default orientation. This is the second step of the invisible sequence. Expectation then changes the emotional state, and this is where the mechanism becomes most concretely visible in daily experience. A person whose expectation is shaped by the certainty of supply carries a fundamentally different emotional signature than one whose expectation is shaped by doubt. The tone of their presence shifts, the quality of their attention in conversations, in work, in decisions. All of it carries either the contraction of fear or the expansion of confident receiving. Emotional state is not cosmetic. It shapes the entire landscape of how a person moves through their day and what they make available to themselves through their choices. Changed emotional state then changes action. This is the chain Wattles was tracing with great deliberateness. The person acting from a state of grateful expectation makes different choices, initiates different conversations, pursues different opportunities than the person acting from lack and fear. The actions are not necessarily more numerous or more aggressive. They are often quieter, more focused, less desperate. They carry the quality of cooperation rather than the quality of emergency. And this difference in the quality of action is not philosophically interesting. It is practically decisive because people respond to cooperation differently than they respond to desperation. Action, in turn, changes contact. The person acting from grateful alignment places themselves in the path of different people, different environments, different possibilities. They show up differently in negotiations, in relationships, in the moments where supply is deciding which channel to flow through. The way a person arrives at an opportunity is often as important as the opportunity itself. The person whose action has been shaped by gratitude and expectation arrives as someone who already believes they belong there. That quality of presence opens channels that anxious, lack-driven action keeps closed. Contact, sustained over time, opens channels that were previously inaccessible. Channels, in Wattles' model, are the people, circumstances, events, and arrangements through which the formless source delivers visible supply. The same person, the same desire, the same general situation, but with the channels open, supply can find its way through. Channels are opened by consistent alignment. They are kept open by the gratitude current. A person who sustains gratitude as a living force does not need to know in advance which specific path supply will take. They only need to keep the channel available. Gratitude is the mechanism by which that availability is maintained. And when channels are open and action is aligned with supply, evidence begins to appear. This is the last step in the sequence and also, paradoxically, the most dangerous one for the gratitude practice, because it is tempting to make evidence the foundation of gratitude rather than its product. The person who has followed this sequence genuinely will begin to see results. Things will shift. Unexpected connections will form. Opportunities will appear that were not visible before. The natural human response is to feel grateful because these things have happened. But Wattles' law demands that the gratitude must not rest there, that it must return to source, deepen the connection, and continue the current regardless of whether more evidence is visible today. Evidence is the sign that the current is working, not the reason to maintain it. The current, once established, is vulnerable, not because the source withdraws or becomes unreliable, but because the mind is easily pulled away from its position by the steady pressure of ordinary life. The most common interruption is complaining after gratitude, beginning the day with a sincere act of thanks, and then, within hours, allowing the mind to settle into chronic complaint about what is difficult, insufficient, or unfair. This is not hypocrisy. It is the default gravity of a mind that has not yet made gratitude into a sustained posture. But the effect on the current is immediate. The channel that gratitude opened in the morning is narrowed or closed by the afternoon's complaints. A more subtle interruption is the pattern of thanking in the morning and fearing at night. Many people can hold gratitude at the beginning of a day, when the mind is fresh and has not yet encountered the day's friction. But as the hours pass and challenges accumulate, fear reasserts itself. By evening, the gratitude of the morning feels like a distant and perhaps naive episode. The channel that was open at sunrise is partially blocked by midnight because fear has been allowed to rebuild its structure all day long. The gratitude practice must be capable of surviving contact with the actual day, or it is not yet a current. It is only a morning ritual. Being grateful exclusively after proof is the structural flaw already discussed, but it deserves its place here among the interruptions because it is so ingrained. The human mind is conditioned to respond to evidence. When good things arrive, gratitude appears naturally. When they do not, gratitude must be chosen. Most people, following the path of least resistance, allow gratitude to be conditional on visible results, and in doing so, they make gratitude structurally incapable of preceding the results it is supposed to generate. They are perpetually waiting for the thing that can only come after them. Comparison is another current breaker that receives too little attention in gratitude teaching. The moment the mind begins measuring its supply against the supply of others, gratitude is replaced by either resentment or relief. And both of those states sever the connection to source. The person who feels grateful that they have more than their neighbor has directed gratitude toward a comparison, not toward the formless source. The person who resents a neighbor's abundance has replaced gratitude entirely with its opposite. Neither comparison gratitude nor comparison resentment creates a current. Only direct acknowledgement of source produces the connection Wattles described. Using gratitude as a manipulation technique is a corruption that the modern manifestation culture has unfortunately spread widely. The idea of thanking the universe in advance as a strategy to receive faster, as though the formless thinking stuff can be coaxed into compliance by a sufficiently enthusiastic thank you, reduces gratitude to a spiritual transaction. It places the human mind in a position of attempted manipulation rather than genuine relation. Wattles never described source as something to be manipulated. He described it as something to be aligned with. Gratitude used as a leverage tactic is not gratitude at all. It is the performance of gratitude for an ulterior motive, and it breaks the current by introducing dishonesty into the relation. Perhaps the most quietly corrosive interruption is resentment of the current stage. The person who is genuinely trying to practice gratitude but secretly resents where they are, who thanks Source while privately feeling bitter about the distance between their current circumstances and their desired ones, has introduced a contradiction at the center of the practice. Gratitude acknowledges supply. Resentment insists on lack. These cannot occupy the same mental position simultaneously. The current requires that gratitude be the dominant orientation, not an overlay on top of a resentment that remains unchallenged. Moving from resentment to genuine gratitude may require confronting the resentment honestly, rather than attempting to cover it with practiced words. Imagine a key, not a decorative key, but a working one. A key placed in a lock that, when turned, opens a door through which supply can move. Gratitude is that key. And here is the critical point that most practitioners miss. Turning the key once is not enough. The door opens when the key is turned and held. The moment the key is removed, the moment gratitude ceases to be a maintained orientation and becomes merely a past gesture, the door returns to its closed position. The lock is not broken, the mechanism still works, but the key must remain engaged for the door to remain open. This is precisely the frustration of the inconsistent practitioner. They practice gratitude genuinely for a time. They feel the contact. They notice the shift in quality that follows. They may even begin to see new channels forming. And then they stop, or they reduce the practice to its mechanical form, or they allow weeks of irregular effort to dilute what was building. The door closes, the channels narrow, The evidence that had been accumulating slows or stops. And they conclude that gratitude works sometimes, but not reliably, not understanding that the variability of results is tracking the variability of the current, not some arbitrary behavior of the source. The key is hidden, as the title declares. Hidden not because it is rare or inaccessible, but because of what people assume it is. When most people look for the mechanism behind creation, behind wealth, behind the certain way, behind the movement from desire to received supply, they look for strategies, for actions, for the right sequence of practical steps. The key does not look like any of those things. It looks like a feeling, it looks soft, it looks passive. And because it looks that way to the eye that is searching for leverage and technique, it is overlooked, underestimated, and never used with the full force it carries. What makes the current metaphor precise is its quality of sustained directionality. A current does not pulse and pause. A current flows. It maintains direction. It carries energy continuously between its source and its destination. Real gratitude, as Wattles defined it, has this character. It is not a moment of thanks that flashes at the start of the day. It is an ongoing orientation, the mind turned towards source, sustained across the ordinary friction of the hours, renewed when it dims, deepened when circumstances make it more difficult rather than easier. The gratitude current keeps the channel alive the way blood keeps the body alive, not through isolated beats, but through continuous, uninterrupted flow. Understanding the current metaphor also clarifies what Wattles meant by saying, gratitude must precede all creative effort. The channel must be open before supply can move through it. The current must already be flowing before the desire can travel along it. Beginning a day of work, of desire, of creative effort, from a position of lack consciousness, without first restoring the current of gratitude, is like turning on a tap and expecting water to flow through a pipe that has not been connected. The act of work is real. The desire is real. But the connection to source is missing, so the effort produces friction rather than flow. Gratitude is not a preparation for the real work. Gratitude is the invisible infrastructure that makes the real work productive. The door metaphor and the current metaphor taken together tell the same story from two angles. The door metaphor shows what gratitude protects, an opening through which supply can move. The current metaphor shows what gratitude maintains, a living directional flow between the mind and the source. Both are true simultaneously. The grateful mind is a door held open by a current that flows continuously toward the one thing that never runs out. The formless, responsive, inexhaustible thinking stuff that Wattles placed at the foundation of everything. To hold the key turned, to maintain the current, is not a passive achievement. It is the most active and disciplined inner work the certain way requires. The inner enemy is not ingratitude in its obvious form. Few people who have encountered Wattles's teachings are openly, consciously ungrateful. The enemy is subtler and more defended than that. It is conditional gratitude, the practice of thanking only when the evidence is favorable, of allowing the grateful state to rise and fall in exact proportion to the current visible circumstances. This form of gratitude feels honest. It feels earned. It feels like the only responsible form of thankfulness, because it is rooted in what is actually present and verifiably true. But this apparent honesty is the source of its destructive power. Conditional gratitude makes the grateful state entirely dependent on the old world, on the circumstances that already exist, the supply that has already arrived, the evidence that has already accumulated. It can only affirm what is already visible, which means it cannot function as a creative force at all, because creative force is needed precisely where the visible has not yet caught up with the desired. Conditional gratitude is the perfect tool for maintaining the world as it is. It is completely useless for creating the world as it could be. The deeper problem is structural. If gratitude can only arise in response to favorable circumstances, then the mind that most needs gratitude, the mind in the middle of lack, difficulty, transition, or creative delay, is the mind least equipped to access it. The person who is facing financial pressure, relational strain, or uncertain outcomes is the person for whom the gratitude current is most urgently needed. But conditional gratitude evaporates precisely in those situations. The current shuts off at the moment of greatest demand, leaving the mind alone with its fear and its evidence of absence. Conditional gratitude, then, does not create a new relation to supply. It does not move the mind forward. It simply ratifies the existing state, adds a layer of managed acceptance to it, and returns the person to the same position they were in before the gratitude practice began. Nothing has been reconnected to source. Nothing has been opened. The channel remains in whatever state it was in before the thanks were offered, because the thanks were offered to circumstances rather than to the source behind them. And circumstances, unlike source, have no generative power to respond. The language of conditional gratitude is fluent, reasonable, and entirely convincing to the mind that uses it. I will be genuinely grateful when things actually improve. This sounds mature. It sounds honest. It sounds like the responsible alternative to forced positivity. But what it actually communicates to the mind is a deferred permission, an agreement that the current state is one in which gratitude is not yet appropriate. The mind hears this instruction and acts accordingly. It remains in lack consciousness, waiting for the evidence that will make gratitude feel justified. The supply cannot arrive while the channel is closed. The channel cannot open while gratitude is deferred. The deferral becomes permanent. I need something to be grateful for. This statement presents itself as humble realism, as though the person is simply refusing to be dishonest. But embedded within it is a fundamental misunderstanding of Wattles' framework. Gratitude in the certain way is not directed primarily at visible things. It is directed at source, at the formless intelligence that is always present, always responsive, always containing supply, regardless of what is visible in the moment. There is always something to be grateful for in Wattles' model, because the source of supply is always there. The statement, "I need something to be grateful for," reveals that the mind has been directing its gratitude entirely at circumstances rather than at the origin of supply. Gratitude feels fake right now. This is the honesty argument, and it is the most seductive of the disguises because it sounds like spiritual integrity. If the gratitude is not genuine, why perform it? Better to wait until it is real. But this logic contains a hidden assumption, that gratitude can only be genuine when it arises spontaneously from emotional warmth. Wattles was describing something different. He was describing the disciplined act of directing the mind towards source, regardless of the current emotional temperature. This is not fakeness. It is practice in the athletic sense, the deliberate repetition of a form before it becomes effortless. Waiting for gratitude to feel natural before practicing it is like waiting to feel fit before going to the gym. I am just being honest. This closes the loop of all the preceding defenses. It positions conditional gratitude as virtue, the virtue of honesty, and places the person who practices gratitude before evidence in the role of the naive or self-deceiving one. But honesty about visible circumstances and alignment with source are not in conflict. You can see clearly what is difficult in your present situation and simultaneously direct your gratitude toward the source that contains the supply you need. Seeing difficulty is not incompatible with acknowledging abundance. What is incompatible is seeing difficulty and then fixing the mind there as though it were the final word, which is precisely what all the preceding defenses are designed to do. Each of these phrases, seemingly reasonable and grounded, performs the same function. They keep attention on absence. They maintain the mind's orientation toward what is missing, what has not arrived, what cannot yet be honestly celebrated. And in doing so, they protect the lack consciousness they present as honesty. The inner enemy is not laziness or rebellion against Wattles' law. It is the elaborate, articulate, morally self-justified system the mind constructs to make staying in lack feel like the responsible choice. The first cost of conditional gratitude is that the viewer remains emotionally ruled by evidence. Every day becomes a report card. Did things improve or worsen? Did supply arrive or recede? Did the circumstances move in the desired direction or not? And depending on that report, the emotional state rises or falls, faith expands or contracts, and the sense of connection to source is present or absent. This is an exhausting way to live. The person is not in control of their inner state because the control has been handed entirely to an external world that operates on its own timeline, and according to forces far larger than any one person's desire. Faith, in this condition, cannot hold its form. Wattles was precise about the role of faith in the creative process. It must be steady. It must be maintained under circumstances that argue against it. It must be the anchor, not the variable. But the faith of a person practicing conditional gratitude is not an anchor. It is a barometer. It measures the atmospheric pressure of visible evidence and displays it as either confidence or doubt. This faith cannot sustain the image of supply through the creative delay that every desire experiences before it becomes visible. The image softens, the certainty fades, the person begins to revise the desire downward, and the formless thinking stuff, which responds to the quality and steadiness of thought, has nothing certain to respond to. Desire, held inside conditional gratitude, loses its stability. Desire is not simply a wish. In Wattles' framework, desire is the living seed of creation, the definite, clear image of supply held with confidence by a mind that expects it. When that mind is ruled by evidence, the desire changes shape with the evidence. Good day. The desire feels real and possible and close. Bad day. The desire feels naive or arrogant or disconnected from reality. The image blurs and sharpens and blurs again, never staying clear long enough for the formless thinking stuff to receive it as a stable creative instruction. Desire without stability is not creation. It is wishing. The channel, governed by conditional gratitude, opens and closes in a rhythm that mirrors the fluctuation of visible circumstances. Supply begins to move through a channel that seemed to be forming, a connection, an opportunity, a new arrangement. Then doubt returns, gratitude recedes, lack consciousness reasserts itself, and the channel that was forming begins to narrow again. The supply that was moving toward the person has to find another channel or wait. Over time, the person develops a pattern they cannot explain. Things seem to be building, then they lose momentum, then they build again, then they lose momentum again. They attribute this to luck, to timing, to forces outside themselves. They do not see that the rhythm of their results is tracking the rhythm of their gratitude, opening and closing the channel in exact proportion to whether evidence is currently favorable. The correction begins with a single shift in the nature of the practice. Gratitude must move from being a reaction to being a position. These are not the same thing, and the difference between them is the distance between a mind that is governed by the world and a mind that is capable of governing itself. A reaction is triggered. A position is maintained. A reaction arises when circumstances produce it. A position is chosen and held, regardless of what circumstances are currently producing. The person who treats gratitude as a reaction will always be at the mercy of their external world. The person who treats gratitude as a position has taken the first step toward the inner sovereignty that Wattles described as the foundation of the certain way. This means the practice must begin before evidence arrives, not after the result, before. Not when it feels natural and especially when it does not. Specifically, deliberately, and with full awareness that the visible world has not yet confirmed what the gratitude is acknowledging, the mind turns towards source and offers its recognition. This is not delusion. This is not pretending things are other than they are. This is the disciplined act of insisting that the source of supply is real and the relation is active, regardless of what the current visible state is reporting. The mind is choosing its orientation rather than inheriting it from the morning news of its circumstances. The direction of gratitude must also shift from things towards source. Most gratitude practice, even the genuine variety, is directed at visible possessions: health, family, home, past experiences. These are valid and real, but they are not the source. They are expressions of supply that has already moved through channels that were already open. Thanking them is appropriate, but if gratitude terminates there, if it never moves from the visible thing to the formless origin behind it, the current never reaches the source that generates supply. The grateful mind must learn to move through visible blessings and reach toward the intelligence that produced them. That is where the current is actually sustained. This preparation closes the door on the inner enemy, not through force, but through redirection. The conditional mind asks, what do I have to be grateful for today? The position gratitude mind asks, am I turned towards source? These questions lead different lives. The first keeps the mind in the evaluation of visible circumstances. The second returns the mind to its fundamental orientation, regardless of what circumstances are currently presenting. The turning point the next section will describe grows directly from this shift, from a mind that evaluates its gratitude to a mind that maintains it as the non-negotiable condition of every day. The first thing to stop is using gratitude as decoration, placing it at the margins of life as a pleasant practice that signals good character without actually producing a current. Decoration has no force. A painting of a door does not open a room. Gratitude placed decoratively around the edges of a life that is still fundamentally governed by lack consciousness is the same kind of painting. It may look like the practice, it may feel like spiritual seriousness, but it produces nothing because it was never connected to the mechanism it was supposed to operate. Waiting for proof before extending gratitude must also be stopped, and stopped cleanly, not reduced, not balanced with occasional pre-evidence gratitude. Stopped as the governing principle of the practice. The mind that waits for proof has accepted a premise that destroys creative force before it can be assembled, the premise that gratitude is a response, not a cause. This premise feels modest and grounded. In Wattles' system, it is quietly catastrophic. Every moment spent waiting for proof before offering gratitude is a moment in which the channel is closed and the current is absent, which means every such moment is a delay in the creative sequence. Mixing gratitude with complaint is the third pattern that must end. Some people can begin and end a single breath cycle in gratitude and complaint simultaneously. I am so thankful for this, but things are really difficult, and I don't know if it's working, and I'm grateful for what I have, even though what I need hasn't arrived. This mixture is not more honest than pure gratitude. It is more confused. Complaint after gratitude does not enrich the practice. It cancels it. The current that gratitude opens, complaint closes. They cannot both be true of the same mental state at the same time. The mind must choose its dominant orientation and commit to it. Thanking from fear is a subtler pattern, but equally important to stop. This is the person who practices gratitude compulsively, anxiously, as though the frequency of their thanks will somehow prevent bad outcomes. The gratitude here is driven by the fear that if it is not offered regularly enough, things will fall apart. So this is not gratitude in the direction of supply. It is fear using the language of gratitude. And the mind from which this form is practiced is still fundamentally a fear mind, still oriented toward lack, still measuring supply by the apparent severity of what might be lost. Fear-driven gratitude carries the signature of fear into every channel it touches. Finally, stop treating gratitude as emotional politeness, as the spiritual equivalent of good manners, the acknowledgement of what has been given so as not to appear ungrateful. This is the most benign of the patterns and therefore the easiest to perpetuate indefinitely without noticing its limitation. Politeness is a social form. It is directed at other people, at social arrangements, at the invisible contract of courtesy that makes communal life possible. But the source of supply is not a social arrangement. It does not require politeness. It responds to alignment. Gratitude offered as politeness stays at the surface of the social world. Gratitude offered as force reaches the formless origin of everything that the polite world moves within. What must be accepted, fully, not tentatively, is that gratitude is causal, not contributory, not helpful, causal. It is one of the conditions without which the creative sequence, as Wattles described it, cannot proceed. This is a stronger claim than most gratitude teaching makes, and it needs to be accepted at that strength. If you accept it partially, gratitude is helpful, it probably contributes to positive outcomes. You will practice it with partial force and receive partial results. Accepting gratitude as causal means treating its presence or absence the way you would treat the presence or absence of any other essential condition. You would not begin building without the foundation. Do not begin creating without the current. The second acceptance is that gratitude keeps the relation to Source alive. This is the relational dimension that conditional and mechanical gratitude perpetually miss. The relation to Source is not self-maintaining. It does not continue automatically while you are busy elsewhere. Like any living relation, it requires attention, direction, and renewal. Gratitude is the specific act of renewing that relation. Each genuine act of thanks directed toward the formless thinking stuff reactivates the connection, restores the channel, and reasserts the mind's position as a receiving point for supply. This is not laborious. It takes moments, but it must be done, and it must be done continuously, or the relation fades by default. Accept also that gratitude is the specific protection the mind possesses against lack consciousness. The mind left unattended gravitates toward awareness of what is missing, not because human beings are by nature ungrateful, but because the visible world continuously offers evidence of scarcity. Prices, delays, comparisons, setbacks, the gap between what is desired and what is currently present. Against this continuous evidence, the mind needs an equally continuous practice of reorientation. Gratitude is that practice. It is not denial of what is visible. It is the regular deliberate act of insisting that what is invisible, the source, the supply, the already available abundance of the formless, is also real, and is in fact more fundamentally real than any temporary condition of lack. Active receiving is what gratitude actually constitutes, and this must be accepted against the instinct to treat it as passive. Receiving feels like waiting. Receiving feels like stillness. But genuine receiving, the posture of a mind aligned with Source, expectant, open, grateful, is deeply active. It requires sustained attention, the continuous exercise of inner discipline, the refusal to allow outer circumstances to determine inner orientation. The grateful mind is working at all times. The effort is invisible. The result, when the channel is open and current is flowing, is the appearance of things that arrive without strain, which looks from the outside like effortless good fortune, but is from the inside the product of sustained, invisible, and demanding inner work. Gratitude is part of the certain way. This must be accepted not as an addendum to the system, but as one of its structural requirements. The certain way, in Wattles' language, is the specific sequence of inner and outer conditions that reliably connects thought to supply. Every element of that sequence matters. The definite image of supply matters, faith matters, efficient action matters, and gratitude matters, because without it the channel closes, faith becomes unstable, and even a clear image cannot hold its form long enough to complete the creative movement. Gratitude is not a bonus feature of the certain way. It is load-bearing. Gratitude is my force. Let those words settle without hurrying past them. Not gratitude is my practice. Not gratitude is part of my routine. Force, the strongest word in the vocabulary of creation. The thing that moves, that shapes, that compels. Accepting gratitude as your force is accepting that your inner orientation toward Source is the most powerful instrument you possess. More powerful than strategy, more powerful than intelligence operating without alignment, more powerful than effort driven by fear. This is the new position, not a position you will arrive at eventually. A position that is available right now, in this breath with this recognition. I thank before evidence. This is the sentence that separates the creative mind from the reactive one. The person who waits for evidence to thank is always behind the process they want to accelerate. The person who thanks before evidence is positioned at the creative edge, where the formless is still responding, where the channel is open and the supply is moving, but the visible confirmation has not yet materialized. That is exactly where gratitude is most needed, most powerful, and most consistently abandoned. I thank before evidence is not a performance. It is the disciplined assertion that the relation to Source does not depend on what is currently visible. I stay connected to Source. Connection is not a passive state, it is a maintained one. The mind that stays connected to Source is the mind that returns to its grateful orientation after every disturbance, after the bill, after the delay, after the doubt, after the conversation that returned it temporarily to lack consciousness. Staying connected does not mean the connection is never disturbed. It means the disturbance is never allowed to become permanent. The current dims and is renewed. The key turns and is held. The channel narrows and is reopened. Staying connected is the commitment to this renewal as many times as the day requires. I do not let lack break the current. Lack will present its case daily. It will show up as evidence, as reasonable concern, as responsible awareness of what is missing or what could go wrong. These presentations are not lies. The lack is often genuinely present in visible form. The discipline is not to deny it, but to refuse its sovereignty over the direction of attention. Lack can be acknowledged without becoming the anchor point of the mind. The current is what keeps this refusal functional. As long as gratitude is maintained as force, lack remains a temporary condition of the visible world rather than a permanent definition of reality. I receive from the grateful mind. This is the final element of the new position, and it completes the architecture. Creation in Wattles' model flows through channels that respond to alignment. The grateful mind is the aligned mind, turned toward source, stable in faith, clear in image, open in channel. Receiving is not a passive act performed by a person who has given up. It is the specific, active, alert posture of a mind that knows supply is real, knows the current is flowing, and moves through its day with the quiet confidence of someone who has not mistaken the closed door for a permanent wall. The grateful mind receives because it has made itself receivable. Every moment of difficulty in a life that is attempting to practice Wattles' system is, at its core, a decision point. The decision is always the same. The mind can respond to difficulty with complaint, with the articulate, honest, completely understandable expression of why the current circumstances are not what was hoped for. Or the mind can respond by returning the current, by deliberately, consciously turning back toward source, with gratitude that does not wait for the difficulty to resolve before it flows. These are the two available choices. There is no third option. Every response, in every moment, moves in one direction or the other. Complaint deserves its honest acknowledgement here. It is not merely a bad habit or a spiritual failure. Complaint feels truthful. It feels like the responsible act of naming reality as it is rather than dressing it up in wishful thinking. And in a world that often punishes honesty, the person who complains has the fleeting satisfaction of being real, of refusing to pretend. But in Wattles' system, complaint is not more honest than gratitude. It is simply more focused on the visible portion of reality while ignoring the formless portion. Complaint sees the lack. Gratitude sees the source. Neither is seeing the whole picture, but only one of them keeps the channel open. The subtle trap is that complaint feels like information, like useful intelligence about what needs to change and why. But chronic complaint, even when it contains accurate observations, returns the mind to lack consciousness. And a mind in lack consciousness cannot access the clear image, the stable faith, or the open channel that the creative sequence requires. The information in complaint is often real. The mental state that delivers it is destructive to the process that could actually address what is being complained about. Gratitude is not the refusal to be informed. It is the discipline of processing information without surrendering mental alignment. The choice must be made not once, but continuously. Not at the start of a spiritual journey, but in the ordinary moment of this Tuesday afternoon, when the email did not arrive and the number is still the same and the plan is taking longer than it should. In that moment, not in a moment of peace and spiritual clarity, but in that specific Tuesday afternoon, the choice between complaint and current is the choice between maintaining a creative life and abandoning it. That is how seriously Wattles treated the decision. That is how seriously the certain way requires it to be treated. Force is not a quality for comfortable mornings. Force is a quality for exactly the moments when it is hardest to sustain. Choose force over mood. Choose current over complaint. Choose it now and choose it again after that. Every day offers a beginning, a moment before the mind has engaged the world's report of what is present and what is absent. That moment is the primary opportunity for the gratitude current to be established before it has any resistance to overcome. The practice begins there, before checking the account, before reading the messages, before the mind has received any of today's evidence. In that moment of relative openness, direct attention deliberately towards source, not toward the list of what is possessed, but toward the formless, thinking stuff itself. Acknowledge it. Acknowledge that it is real, that it is responsive, that supply is its nature, and not something it reluctantly provides. This directed acknowledgement is the current being initiated. Notice the difference between thanking your possessions and thanking your source. Thanking your health, your relationships, your past experiences, these are natural and appropriate, but they are finite. They are the supply that has already arrived through channels already open. When gratitude terminates at the visible supply, it circles within what has already happened, rather than reaching toward what is still forming. To thank Source for supply as law, as the ongoing, inexhaustible nature of the formless intelligence, is to extend the gratitude beyond the visible and into the creative domain where tomorrow's supply is still taking shape. The daily practice must include this extension. Practice gratitude before checking evidence. This is the concrete discipline that separates position gratitude from reaction gratitude. Before looking at the numbers, before reading the responses, before measuring the morning against the desired destination, offer the current. The sequence matters enormously. When gratitude precedes evidence, it shapes the context within which evidence will be received. The mind that meets the morning's news from a position of grateful alignment receives that news differently than the mind that has been waiting to evaluate it. Even difficult evidence, received by a grateful mind, does not have the power to close the channel that the gratitude current has already opened. Let gratitude govern perception throughout the day, not only at the beginning of it. This means developing the habit of returning to the current at multiple points, not as interruptions to the practical work, but as its invisible support. The gratitude current does not require long periods of meditation or elaborate ritual. It requires the brief, genuine, repeated act of turning towards Source with recognition. A few deliberate moments of this reorientation, distributed across the day, can hold the channel open through circumstances that would otherwise narrow it. Perception shaped by gratitude sees channels that fear perception cannot see. The person with the current flowing recognizes supply opportunities that the person in lack consciousness would walk past without awareness. When the thought arrives that says, "Nothing is happening," receive it without flinching, and then replace it with a thought that is both more honest and more aligned. "I remain connected." This is not a denial, it is an expansion of the frame. "Nothing is happening" draws a conclusion from visible evidence alone. "I remain connected" draws its conclusion from the nature of the relation. The source is real, the current is active, the channel is open, and visible evidence does not exhaust the full scope of what is occurring. The replacement is not forced positivity. It is a more complete account of reality than the fear thought offers. When the thought says, "I need proof before I can trust this," replace it with, "Gratitude is my proof of relation." This reframes the entire question of evidence. Proof, in the conventional sense, is external confirmation that something is working. But in Wattles' system, the mind that genuinely practices gratitude as current is not without evidence. It is experiencing the direct, internal evidence of being in relation to Source. That relation is real. The current is real. The alignment is real. These internal realities are evidence, even when the external world has not yet rearranged itself to match the image held in faith. The practitioner who grasps this stops waiting for external confirmation and draws strength from the quality of the internal relation itself. Replacing complaint with recognition is the daily discipline of the mind that takes this work seriously. When difficulty appears, a genuine obstacle, a real disappointment, an honest setback, the mind's first impulse is complaint. Complaint names the problem. Recognition acknowledges the problem and simultaneously acknowledges the reality of Source. This is difficult, and the channel is open. This has not arrived yet and supplies the nature of what I am connected to. These statements are not contradictions. They are the simultaneous holding of both realities that the creative mind must learn to sustain. Recognition is not a pretense that problems are not problems. It is the refusal to let problems be the last and final word. Avoid the substitution of fake positivity for lawful gratitude. This is an important boundary. Fake positivity says, everything is perfect, all is wonderful, there is nothing to address. Lawful gratitude says this is real, and source is also real, and my relation to source is the active force in this situation. The difference is not merely semantic. Fake positivity denies the visible world. Lawful gratitude holds both the visible world and the formless source simultaneously, without collapsing into either pure complaint or pure denial. Wattles was not a positive thinking teacher in the performance sense. He was a causation teacher. The cause is gratitude as current, not as cheerfulness. These are different disciplines, and only one of them produces the result he described. Action that flows from the gratitude current carries a different quality than action driven by urgency, fear, or competitive pressure. When the mind is held in genuine gratitude towards source, the action that arises from it is action from sufficiency. The person is not moving because they are afraid of falling behind, but because they are cooperating with the supply that is already moving toward them. This sufficiency quality does not make action slower or less ambitious. It makes it more precise, more sustained, and less prone to the desperate forcing that burns energy without producing effective contact with channels of supply. The present work, whatever stands immediately in front of the person at this moment, must receive the full attention of a grateful mind. This means approaching ordinary tasks not as obstacles to the desired destination, but as the current terrain through which the certain way is actually walked. Wattles was clear. Efficient action is action that advances from the present position toward the supply that is already moving. The person who does present work with grateful attention is not wasting time on the mundane. They are demonstrating to the formless thinking stuff, through the quality of their engagement with what is immediately available, that they are capable of receiving more. Gratitude in action is the proof of readiness. Resentment toward current circumstances, when it enters action, turns the action into the expression of the very state it is trying to escape. The person who goes to work resentfully performs tasks with contempt, or engages with current channels while mentally elsewhere in a preferred reality. That person is not acting in the certain way, regardless of how many gratitude lists they wrote that morning. Gratitude must permeate the action, not merely precede it. When resentment is removed from action, when the work is done with the same force that directed thanks to source, the action itself becomes a current. It carries the quality of aligned cooperation rather than reluctant obligation. Avoid forcing. This is one of the specific dangers of acting from lack consciousness. The tendency to push too hard, to override natural timing, to compress what the formless is still organizing by substituting frantic effort for aligned patience. Forcing is the action signature of a mind that does not trust the source, that fears the supply will not arrive unless manually seized. The grateful mind acts with purpose and presses with intelligence, but it does not force. It moves with the current rather than against it. This is not passivity. It is the sophisticated discipline of knowing the difference between effective pressure and counterproductive tension. Action becomes cooperation with supply when it is undertaken from a position of grateful alignment. Not negotiation with supply, not forcing supply, not beseeching supply. Cooperation. The language of cooperation carries an important implication. The person is not alone in the action. The formless thinking stuff is already moving. The supply is already organizing. The person's role in the certain way is to act with efficiency and alignment from the present position, to cooperate with what is already moving rather than to generate all motion from personal effort alone. Gratitude makes this cooperation possible by keeping the mind in relation with the source that is already active. Doubt is not the absence of ability or desire. It is a thought that presents itself as evidence. This is not working. Gratitude is not enough. I have been doing this and nothing has changed. These thoughts will come. They will arrive with the full authority of lived experience and the apparent support of visible circumstance. And when they arrive, the first instruction is this: do not argue with them on their own terms. Do not engage doubt with the counter-doubt that says, but it probably is working. Instead, return to source. The return to source is not a response to doubt. It is a departure from it, a deliberate redirection of attention away from doubt's domain and back to the ground of the relation. Name 3 evidences of supply that are already present in your life, not to prove to doubt that things are actually fine, but to restore the mind's contact with the reality of supply as something already active. The evidence does not need to be dramatic, a conversation that opened unexpectedly, a cost that did not materialize, a capability that was present when it was needed, a small movement in a direction that had been still. These are supply expressed in modest form. Doubt dismisses them because they are not the culmination yet, but they are evidence that the channel is not fully closed, that supply is moving, however the rate appears from inside the impatience of the waiting mind. Then thank before the next piece of proof arrives. This is the specific, concrete application of pre-evidence gratitude at the moment of greatest internal resistance. Doubt is arguing for withdrawal. The practice calls for advance. Direct the grateful current toward source right now, with doubt present and not yet resolved. Not waiting for the doubt to subside before thanking, but thanking while doubt is still in the room. This is the point where position gratitude proves that it is actually a position rather than a conditional response. The current either flows under difficulty, or it is not yet a current. Practice the flow while doubt watches. Take one grateful action. Not a large action, not a desperate action, not an action designed to force a result within the next hour. One action that proceeds from the position of gratitude, something that can only be taken by a person who believes supply is real and moving. A letter written without certainty of response, a step taken without guarantee of the next step, a call made from sufficiency rather than fear. The action does not need to be significant in scale. It needs to carry the inner signature of a mind that has returned from doubt to gratitude, from closed to open, from waiting for evidence to creating with the current already flowing. Consider a person facing genuine financial pressure. The account is lower than it should be. The opportunities seem distant. The weeks have passed without the movement that was expected. Their first response, the completely natural one, is complaint, followed by anxious action, followed by the desperate quality of work that comes from trying to force a result through sheer pressure of effort. This is the natural sequence of lack consciousness, and it is not a moral failure. It is simply the default operation of a mind that has not yet found its way to the current. Now the person shifts, not by denying the financial reality, not by performing enthusiasm they do not feel, but by a single interior movement. They direct their attention from the pressure of the situation to the source behind it. They acknowledge that the formless thinking stuff contains inexhaustible supply. They acknowledge that their relation to it is alive, not dead. They offer genuine thanks, not for the condition of the account, but for the reality of source and the fact that the channel can still be opened. The shift is small in its surface appearance. Internally, something fundamental has changed in the direction of mental force. The immediate practical consequence is that the quality of their action changes. They are no longer acting from emergency. The desperation that was making their effort contract rather than expand begins to release. They send the message that they had been delaying because it felt too vulnerable. They take the meeting that seemed like a long shot. They show up to the current work with attention rather than resentment, and this attention produces a quality of engagement that was not there before. None of these actions carry the guarantee of immediate result, but all of them carry a different quality than the ones that were being produced by lack consciousness. Over the following days and weeks, as the current is maintained rather than abandoned the moment doubt returns, something that Wattles described in precise terms begins to occur. Channels become visible that were not visible before, because attention has shifted and is no longer fixed on the evidence of absence. The supply was not absent. The channels were not closed permanently. The person had simply been looking in the direction of lack for so long that the supply channels, which were operating all along, remained outside their field of active attention. Gratitude opened the perception that was always capable of seeing them. The external world did not change first. The inner orientation changed, and the external world began to be experienced differently, which is not the same thing as different circumstances, but is the necessary precondition for them. Strip everything down to what Wattles actually taught, and what remains is this. Gratitude is not a mood. It has never been a mood. Calling it a mood is the misclassification that has made it ineffective in the lives of millions of people who tried to practice it sincerely and found that sincerity alone was not sufficient. A mood is a weather system. It arrives, it passes, it changes with conditions. It cannot be held by an act of will, and it has no reliable relationship to cause and effect. Gratitude, as Wattles defined and taught it, belongs to a completely different category. It is a force of connection. It is a directional act of mind. It is a maintained posture of relation. These are operational terms, not emotional ones. Connection is the word that illuminates everything else. Gratitude is the specific act of connecting the finite, visible, circumstance-bound mind to the infinite, formless, inexhaustible source of supply. The moment this connection is made and held, the mind is no longer alone in its effort. It is in relation to the most creative force in Wattles' universe, the thinking stuff that responds to thought shaped with gratitude and faith by moving in the direction of that thought's image. Without the connection, the effort remains brilliant and purposeful and completely cut off from its own source of supply. With the connection, even modest effort is amplified by the responsive intelligence of the formless. Connection, when sustained, keeps creation moving. Not just initiating it, not just contributing to it, keeping it moving through the inevitable delays, the moments of invisible progress, the stages when nothing visible confirms that the formless is organizing the desired supply. The certain way does not deliver its results all at once in a single dramatic moment of transformation. It moves continuously through a series of adjustments, openings, and organizing events that often appear small or unrelated until the larger pattern becomes visible. What sustains this movement is the gratitude current, the ongoing act of keeping the mind in relation to source, so that each step of the creative process can proceed without the channel closing between them. The old life waits. It waits for proof before extending gratitude. It waits for the account to reflect abundance before acknowledging that abundance is real. It waits for the relationship to be easy before it finds something to be grateful for in the connection. It waits for the health to be restored before it thanks the source for the health it seeks. This waiting feels responsible. It feels grounded, but the old life that practices conditional gratitude is perpetually positioned one step behind the creative process, always responding to what the world has already done rather than participating in what the world is still becoming. The new life does not wait. It thanks before the evidence assembles. It directs gratitude toward source while the visible world is still incomplete, still shifting, still carrying the honest evidence of what has not yet arrived. The new life understands, in Wattles' precise terms, that gratitude before proof is not irresponsibility. It is the specific activity that makes proof possible. The grateful mind creates the conditions that allow supply to complete its journey into the visible. The old life unknowingly blocks that journey by waiting at the end of it with thanks already prepared, but never released. The old mind thanks circumstance. When the promotion arrives, it is grateful for the promotion. When the money increases, it is grateful for the money. When the health improves, it is grateful for the health. This is not wrong. These are real and significant things. But circumstance is not the source. Circumstance is the output. Gratitude directed at output returns gratitude to the end of the process rather than placing it at the beginning. The old mind will always be dependent on the world's behavior, because it has built its entire grateful architecture on the world rather than on the formless intelligence that generates the world's supply. The new mind thanks source. It directs its gratitude toward the formless thinking stuff, toward the inexhaustible, responsive, creative intelligence that is the origin of all visible supply. This mind is not dependent on circumstance for its grateful posture because its gratitude is not rooted in circumstance. It is rooted in the nature of source itself. The source does not change. Its nature does not fluctuate with economic conditions, with personal setbacks, or with the apparent slowness of the creative process. Because the new mind's gratitude is directed at what does not change, the gratitude itself becomes stable. And stable gratitude is the foundation from which a creative life of genuine power is built. The hidden key is not rare. That is the first thing to understand clearly. Now that the mechanism has been fully traced, the key has always been accessible. It has always been simple in its nature. Every person who has ever read Wattles or encountered any tradition of inner causation has had this key placed directly before them. The hiddenness is not a matter of access. It is a matter of underestimation. The key was looked at and set aside because it looked like a feeling. It looked like the soft, pleasant, feminine gesture of gratitude rather than the hard, mechanical, reliable force that it actually is. The hiddenness was always a function of the observer's assumption, not of the key's scarcity. What hides it most effectively is the world's training in evaluation. The person trained to evaluate, to measure, to verify, to ground all belief in visible confirmation, will consistently underestimate gratitude, because gratitude asks the mind to move before the evidence moves. The evaluating mind wants to thank after the result. Gratitude asks for the current before the result. These two demands are incompatible, and the trained evaluator will always default to the evaluation. This is why Wattles' teaching required not just new information, but a genuine reorientation, a willingness to let the inner law govern the direction of attention rather than outsourcing that governance to the external world. Gratitude forces creation by refusing to let the mind return to lack. This is the hidden key in its most compressed and useful form. Every time the mind would naturally drift back into lack consciousness, into counting what is missing, measuring what has not arrived, building its expectation on the current evidence, gratitude intervenes. It does not argue against the visible lack. It does not pretend the lack is not there. It simply refuses the lack's authority over the direction of attention. The current returns the mind to source, reasserts the reality of supply, reopens the channel, and restores the creative sequence to function. This refusal, consistent, practiced, disciplined, is what forces creation, not by fighting the external world. By declining to let the external world's current incomplete state close the interior channel through which supply must ultimately move. Something in you already knows this law. You have felt it in the moments when gratitude was genuine, when something shifted in the quality of a day, when a channel opened that had been closed, when action felt aligned rather than desperate. Those moments were not accidents of temperament or luck. They were the gratitude current operating in its natural capacity. What this entire teaching has offered is the name of the force you have already briefly touched, and the instruction to stop touching it accidentally and begin holding it deliberately as a position rather than an episode. The mechanism is real. The law is reliable. The key works every time it is held in the lock. The question now is not whether you understand what has been described. The question is what you will do with the understanding in the next 24 hours and in the 24 after that. Gratitude practiced as force does not ask for a perfect beginning. It asks for a genuine orientation, a real turning of the mind towards source, before evidence, with the quiet and powerful acknowledgement that the formless thinking stuff is alive, responsive, and already moving in the direction of the supply you carry as a definite image held in faith. That is all the beginning requires: the turning, the acknowledgement, the current initiated, held, and renewed. That is the certain way as Wattles actually meant it. Right now, before you close this and return to the day that still holds all its original pressure and unresolved questions, something deserves to be claimed openly, not hoped for, not practiced tentatively, but claimed. Gratitude is my force. Not gratitude as something you will add to your morning, or something you will try when circumstances are favorable. Force. The thing that keeps the current alive when doubt is present. The thing that holds the key turned when the door has not opened yet. The thing that refuses to let the mind surrender its alignment to the momentary authority of lack. This is the declaration of a person who has stopped waiting for the world to give them permission to be grateful and has chosen instead to let gratitude generate the world. Speak it again if you are willing. Gratitude is my force. Let the words carry the weight of what has been described across this entire teaching. Not weight as burden, but weight as density, as the specific gravity of a mind that has accepted a law and decided to live inside it rather than merely appreciate it from the outside. The viewer who carries this declaration into tomorrow is not the same as the viewer who arrived at the beginning of this video with the quiet frustration of a gratitude practice that was not working. You now know why it was not working. You now know what was missing. The current was absent. You have the key. Turn it, hold it. Do not remove it. If this declaration resonates as true, if something in the architecture of what has been described here matches what you have quietly known but not been able to name, write the words below. Not as a comment offered to an algorithm, but as a public commitment made by a mind that has chosen force over mood, current over complaint, source over circumstance. Let the declaration mark the moment the practice changed from decoration to force. Gratitude is my force. Write it where it can be seen, by yourself and by anyone else who is still sitting at the edge of the practice, wondering whether it is really powerful enough to change anything real. If this teaching has done what Wattles' law actually does, opened something, clarified something, restored something that was fading, there is more on this channel that carries the same current. Wallace Wattles left a body of work that most people have encountered only at the surface. The science of getting rich is quoted everywhere and understood almost nowhere in its true operational depth. Every teaching on this channel moves from the surface toward that depth, toward the actual mechanism, the hidden key, the invisible cause behind the visible law. Subscribing is simply choosing to continue the study. Press the button and stay connected to a channel that treats the certain way with the seriousness it was written to deserve. Each new teaching here builds on the last. Gratitude, as you have seen today, is not isolated from faith, from definite thought, from efficient action, from the relation to source that Wattles placed at the center of creation. These elements form a system, and understanding the system changes the practice of every individual part. The next time you direct gratitude towards source, it will carry everything the system knows: the mechanism, the sequence, the force, the current, the key. This channel exists to deepen that understanding until the system operates not as a technique consciously applied, but as the natural direction of a mind that has genuinely accepted the law. From this point forward, you will not treat gratitude as weak. You have seen too clearly what it actually is: the current that connects the finite mind to the inexhaustible source, the force that holds faith stable when evidence argues against it, the key that keeps the channel open through the creative delay that every genuine desire must survive. Weak things do not force creation. Weak things do not hold the door open against the pressure of lack consciousness and the daily accumulation of visible absence. What has been described here is not weak. It never was. It was only underestimated, and underestimation is the one thing you are no longer able to offer it. Hold the current. That is the vow beneath all the language, the instruction compressed to its operational core. Whatever the day brings, whatever evidence accumulates in favor of doubt, whatever reasonable argument lack consciousness assembles for its case, hold the current, return to source, thank before proof, act from sufficiency. Refuse the authority of the incomplete visible world over the direction of your most fundamental inner force. This is not idealism, it is mechanism. The channel works when you hold the current. The supply moves when the channel is open. The creation completes when the mind stays in the relation that gratitude, and only gratitude, makes possible. Gratitude is the hidden key that keeps creation moving. Not occasionally, not under favorable conditions, not for people whose temperament makes thankfulness easy, for anyone who holds the current, for anyone who turns the key and does not remove it, for anyone who has read these words and recognized in them the law that was always operating behind the results they were trying to produce. The key was never lost. It was never scarce. It was never out of reach. It was simply waiting, as all great forces wait, for a mind willing to use it with the full seriousness it deserves.